off the audio.
What's that?
Turn off the audio. Stop recording.
You don't get the turnaround, like, put it back around, you got to go down there.
With that?
Yes, that's.
That's we're gonna get it, Steve.
Thanks.
Thanks.
What?
As you can tell, I'm a novice at this kind of thing.
Might be challenged.
So, yeah, I'll figure it out.
Oh.
So you're gonna have 30 minutes of dead air.
You want me to turn on my mic or?
No.
No, they should be good.
We're good?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Just speak loud.
I'll do my best.
Okay.
God did not give me the best voice. Very white, I'm not. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for the opportunity for us to share with you a little bit. We've been on a nice journey with the committee, working through with the local expertise and kind of assessing the different options that you have. The lead-in was perfect for what I would like to share with you because what our job is to have an objective, data-driven, unbiased approach to giving you some feedback. But the policy choices remain at the local level, right? And there's a lot of policy choices baked into these. So we're not, as you'll see it, even as we go through with recommendations, we're not a firm that comes out and says, this is the one thing that you have to do, and if you don't do it, all things are horrible, and you fall off the face of the earth. What we're really describing is, these are the range of options that you have in front of you, and you all will have to navigate what you can afford, what level of service you want to provide, et cetera, so you can choose the lane that serves you best as a community. Does that sound good? Okay, a little bit about myself. I'm a retired chief officer from a fire department down in Florida. I'm a third generation firefighter. Got my PhD with a cognate in research and measurement, master's in public administration, and my bachelor's was in fire and safety engineering. So other than ruining the family name and going into consulting full time, I do have a little bit of expertise. And then Fitch and Associates, we've been around for 40 years now as a public safety consulting firm that's worked in all 50 states, 12 different countries, and every continent except for Antarctica. I'm not sure that we'll ever get there, but let's just kind of big picture. And the presentation I put together is intended to complement the actual written report, try to keep it as high level as we can. So the big picture numbers is the one of the main premises I'll give away right from the beginning is one of the options is, should you have a single station solution or a two station solution in what you move forward with in the future. So under the single station solution, and we'll get into much more detail as we go through, but the estimated capital cost for that was between 6.4 and 6.8 million. The fire department actually had that from an architect or an engineer go through that. So those numbers are what was provided. That's not, something we made up. But it's also a few years old. So like all things, you would have to reassess that, as you move forward. A two station solution, which includes, the single station cost, can go up as high as 38 million. And I will show you as we go through this, we really estimated very high because there's hundreds of independent local choices for the type of the building, the size of the building, all those kinds of things that will influence what the ultimate cost is. So for example, when we looked at comparisons of other Connecticut fire stations that have been built recently that were just publicly available at council presentations and things, the square foot, the price per square foot for new construction was 1,500. That was the average. So obviously that means that there's some that are getting it for 700-800, and there's also some that are paying a lot more. So these estimates would have to be specifically evaluated for your policy choices and what you're going to do, the land size, how you're going to move forward. And then when we talk about the system performance, I do want to anchor the conversation around as it is today, and the crews, as you saw today, are doing really good work. But from the time that you call 911 until someone arrives from the two fire departments here, is 15.4 minutes, 9 out of 10 times. So it's about 15 minutes or faster, right? That's at the 90th percentile, so that means 9 out of 10 or 90 out of 100 times it'll be that level of service. Obviously, the average will be a little bit less, but in system design, the NFPA standards, things like that, the 90th percentile is the industry standard to measure to, because it's not a flip of the coin, right? At 90th percentile, you can say confidently, this is the level of service that you should be getting. So one of the anchors between a single station solution, as you can imagine in your geography, right? If you have one station, it might take a little bit longer to get to everywhere, right? And if you have two stations, you can divide up the geography a little bit. So on the geography side, if you have two stations, you can get the travel time down to about 8 minutes. And right now, under a single station solution, it would be 10 minutes. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is kind of the agenda. Yes, sir.
One clarification there.
Yes.
When you're talking about the two-station model,
Mhm.
are you talking about full-time personnel on site at both stations?
We're not there yet, but yes.
Okay.
Right.
That was part of the,
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
that factors into the whole picture too.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Also, your time frame, I don't think considers the west side of Wellington.
What do you?
There, cause there's no station on the west side of Wellington anymore. Because station 13 is down.
No, and that is being served out of South Wellington right now.
Right, which is further down.
Correct.
Right, so it takes
Wait,
longer, so
wait.
you got Wellington Hill, and then you got South Station, that's on the east side of Wellington. There's nothing on the west side anymore. So hence my homeowner's insurance went up, because that station's not working anymore.
And something I'm living with too. I live in that corner.
Right, so, you know, when you're making your decision, or whatever, and, I mean, I understand that there's been several emergency facility studies done on station 13, which I don't know why the town paid for numerous studies, but the first one would have been sufficient. In considering this, you need to consider people on the west side of Wilmington.
On both sides.
Well, no, because I mean, there's two stations on the east side, there's nothing on the west.
Two
So that's-
stations. No. South, we have one on Route 32, which is close to the westerly border of county. We have nothing on the east side.
Like. No, on the west side, aren't we? I mean, I'm sorry, if you're splitting. If you're splitting 74, that's the east side over there, we're on the west side, right?
North.
Definitely north.
I mean, north.
Okay, whatever, I'm thinking,
Because on this, on the other side of the highway, there's nothing.
right,
Rob, can I suggest you probably have maps in here? That is what we're here to talk about.
For the sake of the statistics, I think, Steve, what she's getting at, I believe, I don't put words in your mouth, is that the statistics that you have regarding time from a station right now
right,
is not an accurate number because that station is not in operation.
correct,
The statistical analysis that you performed assumed that firehouse was in operation. Is that a fair statement?
It is a fair statement,
Okay.
but when we get to the mapping and the analysis, we kind of whiteboarded it with GIS anyway. So, yeah.
I think your point, Sherry, is that there's no firehouse there.
right,
So it's gonna take longer to
that's
get.
what, right, that's what I'm getting at.
Yes.
That's
That's
not
true.
Best, whatever, it's just not close to me anymore.
Right.
All right.
Response time to get to the highway, there's a lot of accidents on that, but it's quite long to get there.
So, and again, great feedback because these are the policy options of how much protection that you're willing to provide, right? So at the end of the day, those are the conversations. You might opt for multiple stations if that's the concern of the public, right? It's just a matter of how much it's gonna cost and what the net benefit or the marginal value for those additional stations are. That's really what it comes down to. And to your point also, and I'll touch on it when we get to the ISO for the insurance, since you mentioned that. One of the things to consider is an ISO credits an unstaffed station, right? So one of the options could be plunking stations that may or may not be staffed, right? So to help with the insurance coverage. But I'll walk you through some of that as we get there. So, the things that we accomplished, we did a comprehensive data report, we did a comprehensive GIS report with all kinds of scenarios. We modeled alternative configurations, looked at the ISO impacts and costed each alternative to the best that we could do. So total reality already aligned with the standard, right? So let's just look at your service demand, the one on the left. As most people I think would intuitively know, the majority of the calls are EMS in its origin rather than fire in its origin. And you can kind of see that it's almost 74% of the calls are EMS. And on the one on the right, you can kind of see how the dispatch time, the turnout time, the travel time, and the total response time, that's all at the 90th percentile. One of the things I wanted to capture your attention for is the turnout time. So on the turnout time, that's the time that it takes the crews to muster and actually be driving down the road to the incident at the 90th percentile. That is much longer than a staff. Like, for example, your staff resources are gonna outperform that by a lot. They should be getting out of the station in about a minute and a half, right? But because you're relying on volunteers and others coming in under different conditions, it takes longer to do that. So any of the staffed solutions that arise as a policy option will significantly improve the citizens' experience from the total time from when they call 911 until somebody arrives, right? Because that's almost 7 minutes in the middle there of getting crews together to get on trucks to go to the calls. So I wanted to kind of tease that out a little bit. So our analyses really focus on the travel time, because from a GIS component, that's really what you can measure. You can't measure people's, time it takes to get to the station as far as the system design. So we focused on the travel time, and we'll get there. So what the study found, kind of big picture items, the next two slides, the public safety spending is well aligned with the inflation. So from our perspective, we think the spend has been very reasonable and controlled. It was the compounded annual growth was at 5.2%. The snapshot we grabbed during this time frame, the inflation was about 4.5% during that period. So it really tracks fairly well. And the two spends across the departments, if you separate out the EMS, the two spends on the fire side are really pretty similar, right? 166,000 for the Willington Fire Department, and then the Willington Hills was 147,000 for that, and I think that was 2024. So the ambulance billing costs had a nice improvement there as far as additional revenues. Went from 162,000 up to 243,000. One of the things that we did mention, and it's really just an opportunity for the township to evaluate, but our calculations of the billing costs to get that done was between 9 and 12% over that time period. And the industry is really functioning more around 4, 5, 6% for the cost when you outsource the bill. So there might be an opportunity to shop that, but at your call volume, that may not, totally materialize, but there is a small opportunity to maybe save a couple dollars there. The response performance is acceptable for the type of service that you have. And if I go back to this real quick on the bottom right, for combination departments, the NFPA standard, if you will, for combination departments is 14 minutes, and that includes the turnout and the travel at the 80th percentile. Why they changed their fractile measurement, I'm not entirely sure. But if you were to point to a standard, you're pretty well aligned with what would be the typical experience of what the standard drives for combination departments, which is, if that term isn't familiar with you, it's literally a combination of having volunteers and some paid staff, right? That's a definition. So, from a performance standpoint, there aren't any glaring lights other than the fact of what's your sensitivity to being able to get from point A to point B, and what's your sensitivity of having staffed resources ready to go versus non-staffed resources ready to go. But the totality of the performance, the departments are doing really good work. I will say, and this is consistent in what we see across the nation, from the department that provides the ambulance, 77% of all the activity was from somebody with a paid category, right? Whether that was paid on call, part-time, full-time, that kind of thing, which is not uncommon, right? They're paid to run those calls, the vast majority. For the other department, and this is very typical, only about a third of the personnel handled 80–90% of all the activity, which is pretty typical as well in volunteer organizations. So a lot of commitment, good, from a smaller group, but a lot of commitment from that group. A single station can serve 90% of the calls within 10 minutes, and this comes back to that question, and we'll show the mapping on that. Administrative capacity is a challenge between, it's really just a function of the volunteer aspect of the administrative structure. So we did suggest that there might be an opportunity to have a full-time position that kind of herds all that together and helps support the administrative capacity. And then a consolidation between the two departments has some opportunity there because there's duplicative efforts between apparatus efforts, things like that. And the thought is that there could be some mutual benefit to some degree if personnel were able to go to either station and capture a unit and take that to a call versus only being able to go to their current station. So there's some opportunities there to move forward with, which we'll talk about. And then similarly, we had a focus areas on the front page about adopting what your performance is, selecting your station alternatives, employing, we called it emergency services coordinator. It could be fire chief, could be emergency manager / something else. It's really up to you all. If that recommendation resonates with you, you can name it what you want, but we're trying to keep the function of not competing with the fire chiefs if the fire chiefs remain, right? So we kind of had multiple options running at the same time. Reduce capital liabilities by the fixed and mobile. So if you think about it, right, if the two stations weren't trying to be independent, you have an opportunity to consolidate the number of mobile apparatus. And we heard, the conversation earlier where it's almost $1 million for a fire engine now. So you have some opportunity to be a little leaner, more judicious on that spend. And then for the station as well, right? A single station. Now, maybe it won't resonate with the expectations for the service level, but certainly a single station, if you had to make some major investments, is going to be less of an investment than if you had 2 or more stations, right? And then the last piece of this is planning for paid staff in its eventuality at some point. I'll walk through that a little more detail, but we built out the option as if you had one dedicated fire engine with 3 people, and then you continue to maintain your ambulance like you are today. And that fire engine could jump back and forth with a second ambulance for the percentage of times that you had a second call in your community, which is a pretty typical. And then run a strategic planning. So one of the recommendations we did make is much like your committee's effort. At the end of all this, when you get some momentum about which direction you want to go, we would recommend assembling that committee, including the public like you are here, and then really navigating, okay, what are we going to do? What's the timeline? Who's responsible? How do we get it over the finish line, and how do we implement it? So central choice, single station or 2 stations. So we kind of built out the different options. In the report, I had a different graphic, but that was a little too big for the PowerPoint. The major decision points are whether or not 10 minutes is an acceptable travel time, right, for a single station solution. If it's not, then the flow diagram goes, no, you jump right to a two-station solution, right? But if 10 minutes is okay, then you go down to the next ISO, you're gonna have minimal impact on that, not none, but minimal impact is gonna be limited. Reduced fiscal obligation, go down to all hazard response, and then you have a cost center. And then same kind of flow chart for a two-station solution. You're gonna see whether or not 8 minutes is acceptable or not. Minimum impact insulating the department, deployment and trading, which I'll talk about. It's about 2 minutes faster, so you'll have a better response time once they're staffed. And all hazards response, same as before, but it does open the door to having an EMS only location if that's what you wanted to do, because you could have a crew that cross staffs between an ambulance and a fire engine for a second call. So there's opportunities there. Then, of course, the costs are significant in order to do that. So what the two options do share, because I do want to separate everything as everything isn't linked in 100%, like you have to do all of them together. So if consolidation of the departments has any momentum, then you could do that regardless of whether it's a single station or double station. It probably makes more sense as a single station, right? Same emergency services coordinator opportunity, so it's not dependent on how many stations you have. And the apparatus rationalization of reducing the total spend on that really does resonate regardless of how you do that. So let's talk about ISO just briefly. So if you're not familiar with those, ISO is broken out 50%. Yes, ma'am.
What does ISO stand for?
It is the Insurance Services Organization. Yes, and it's a little nebulous. ISO evaluates communities and gives an ISO rating, right? We've followed that in the fire service industry for decades and decades. However, we're not their client, right? Their client is to sell the rating recommendation to insurers that use that under a proprietary assessment, right? So what that means is we as an industry are blind to what each insurer, like I don't want to name insurers, but insurer A versus insurer B versus insurer C can say that we don't use that recommendation at all. We use that recommendation in a very small part in a big formula, or we use that recommendation in a very, very large part, right? So each insurer will have a different experience based on what that ISO rating is. So it's very difficult. And I would suggest that communities really can't do this, to say, if we invest $2 million or $1 million or whatever, we're gonna save the community a net X on premiums. You can't really do that because there's so much variability and the insurers are proprietary. So we don't know what their rate structure is. So we're kind of blind to that. But in the rating scale, 10% is emergency communications, 50% is the fire department, and 40% is water, right? So that's kind of the big buckets that they evaluate. Looking at your community, one of the things that we did notice, just looking at your scores, is that company personnel, so you have, there could be 15 points, now that would be ridiculous for an agency your size, but you have 6 points now, there's almost 9 points available, so if you added any staffing in the future, that will boost up the overall ISO rating score. Another area, and this is something that goes to, support an emergency services coordinator position that we were talking about, or fire chief, or however you want to title it. But the training component was 1.44 out of a totality of 9 points available. And training is generally a low cost investment. It's more management related, having people in administrative capacity to pull it all off and or document it appropriately and correctly so that the ISO evaluators capture it, right? And we've seen a lot of agencies that do a lot of training, but they don't capture it in a way that they're getting quote unquote credit for it. So there's some opportunities to bolster up the rating, so that you can help insulate against potential changes in the environment as you all make your policy decisions and choices. Does that make sense? Okay. Community risk reduction as well, really pretty good. It's 4 points out of 5.5. So there is an opportunity there as well to bolster that up a little bit. And again, that is a low investment opportunity to bolster that up. Without getting too far in the weeds, the really good thing about community risk reduction, everything else in the ISO rating is all these pieces are a small part of a very, very large equation. The community risk reduction are like bonus points, and they're above and beyond whatever your rating is out of those formulas. So community risk reduction, that score can really move you a fair amount in the scheme of things versus, like, for example, improving training. Because training is gonna be part of the 50-point evaluation under the fire department umbrella, right? So.
What's an example where we go into community risk?
Just,
Reduction.
yeah, targeting where you have fires, and putting in smoke detectors, falls prevention, things like that. Like, it's kind of you're trying to target where are we having risks specifically to fire more so than on the EMS side. But it's those kinds of preventative efforts that fire inspections and all, I mean, 4 points out of the 5.5 is already good. So there's a lot of good effort, but yeah, inspections, plans review, codes, all those kind of things. Yes.
So is this ISO rating both fire and EMS or only fire?
No, it's really only fire.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, now the map on the right. So under the ISO, when you talk about, if you're outside of 5 miles from a fire station, you won't get rated, right? So depending on your insurer, you could get bumped into an unrated category, maybe land in a risk pool, those kinds of things. What you can see is what we modeled here is under a single station solution, which is this is the church property in the fire station there. Mansfield and Stafford, right? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
It's been a while, sorry. You can see from those stations, even a single station solution still covers the vast majority of the area within that 5 miles. So you have good coverage even under a single station. Obviously, a 2-station solution is even better. Yes, ma'am.
So when we're looking at a map, that's geography, but it's not where the population centers are. Do you
Yes.
have that further in the
Mhm.
discussion? Do you have a sense of what percentage of the households that covers versus what percentage of the land that covers?
Yeah, I think of the households, you're really looking good, because ISO, to your point, only cares about the developed area, but we didn't have it GIS mapped for only the developed area. We broke it out into the 2 sides of the zones of the fire department. So in the report, we have the population density, other socioeconomic demographic variables mapped out.
But for example, if in this map,
Yep.
in the upper northeast corner,
Right,
50% of the population of Wellington lived in that unmarked section, it's not real that 80% of all of the land is covered, but not 80% of all of the
Yes,
people are covered.
right.
Okay,
If that concentration is disproportionately heavy, then you're exactly right. If
and this
that's,
doesn't show that.
no,
Okay,
right,
okay.
right. But the same thing is true if it's trees and dirt. Right, that it doesn't matter that it's not covered from ISO's perspective because it's not developed.
Sure matters to the people who live there.
No, absolutely, that's what I'm saying, I don't know
Yeah,
the density, right? I'm just saying the 2 extremes work, right? If it's not
I see what you're
developed,
saying.
right,
I
right,
understand.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So we also looked at the apparatus that we alluded to about, there's an opportunity to reduce some of those. As you can see on the left, this is I might have to call it the confusogram, but all of the blue columns are what the replacement schedule is as it stands, right? So that's what the adopted replacement schedule for all these apparatus are. The NFPA recommendation suggests that it's either refurbed or moved on around the 15-year mark, which is the orange line part of the graph. And then the 25 years is the gray, and bless you, and the NFPA has a pretty hard stop on 25 years as far as using that apparatus. Now, NFPA is not the law of the land, just from a litigious standpoint, if there's an accident or something unsafe and you're outside of those parameters, you probably carry a little bit of a burden. But looking at all that, what we did is we mapped out the units that you don't need anymore. We identify the units that you do, and we have it, so we recommend, follow the replacement plan, but you could extend it. Follow the replacement plan, could extend it. Replacement needed, and this one in specific was on the engine squad rescue. We're just saying engine capabilities plus dual purpose functionality, meaning that it needs to be able to pump and have water. And then that way you can reduce your total footprint. And then the ambulances follow the replacement plan, and the forestry unit, you could extend out to the 25 years, but that's a policy choice on having that specific apparatus. So, yes.
Sorry, can I do that? The graph only shows fire apparatus on the ambulances, correct?
Yes.
So
yes.
you're suggesting that that there's potentially an opportunity to reduce the total fleet from 10 down to 6.
Yes.
Is
Yeah.
that through consolidation or is that? I believe
No,
it's
that's in totality. That's in totality. Yeah.
Thank
Absolutely. And in the report, the lighter vehicles like the ambulances have its own graph, but that's not. Those are expensive, but they're not anywhere near as expensive as the rest. So let's talk about the fiscal picture a little bit. Total public safety spend has been between 878 and 971 across the 3 fiscal years that we looked at. We talked about the compound growth rate of 5.2 and the inflation. We talked about the balance between the investment on the fire side. Ambulance program is right around, 588,000. And then the net ambulance collections, as you can see there, kind of grew. So overall, for the type of operation you've had, we would suggest that the town and the collective has actually done a good job trying to reinforce and support the agencies. That's a pretty good spend for the volunteers. Where you're challenged at this point, from our opinion, is you've kicked the can, if you will, on capital, right? So the stations, the apparatus, so there's a reckoning that's going to come at some point to kind of rectify that. And I think that's where you are now. Everything doesn't have to be done tomorrow in one fell swoop, but it does need to be addressed because it's a compounding problem that you're not going to be able to ignore and get forward on that. So administrative capacity we talked about. I know I've been a little long in the tooth, so I won't go too crazy on that. So consolidation, we kind of put a pro and con on that. I know there's going to be, there's typically sensitivity because of the amount of identity from the 2 agencies about, whether they would or would not want to consolidate from the crew's perspective or the field's perspective. But I think from the administrative perspective in the townships, looking at it more holistically or collectively, there's a lot of good strategy and downstream benefits from attempting to kind of put those together. And you can see the pros and cons on that. I'll leave that up for a second so you can see it.
We can't really read it.
Can't read it?
No. But is that table, are you gonna give us copies of the slides or will they?
Sure, yeah, I'll send Ralph a PDF of everything.
Oh, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But I will read them real quick then, since you can't see it, sorry.
Very much.
All my best efforts, right? So on the pro side, we had dedicated administrative capacity that can help with things like recruitment, training, oversight, improved accountability and transparency, fiscal efficiency, cost controls, reduced duplication for purchasing, and there's a lot of things that are occurring simultaneously or duplicative between the 2 agencies. And then the volunteers can respond to any station, any call, improve response times theoretically. and ability to assemble a better effective response force, you know, collecting enough personnel to do the job. So those are some of the pros. Some of the cons, to be fair, is that the township would have to assume more formal day-to-day responsibility for the operations, depending on, you know, how the coordinator position is implemented. More formal liability, balancing operations against fiscal constraints, formal process to evaluate transfer of assets, considerations for debt management and existing obligations, limitations of volunteers, filling paid shift positions without qualifications, loss of organizational identity, and some volunteer reluctance could be possible. So that's kind of the frame, but overall, we stand by the recommendation that we think there's more positives than negatives, but there certainly, we're not blind that there may be some resistance.
And one of the key points there is your little black banner across the bottom.
Okay,
Can you read it to us?
yes, consolidation is independent of the station cap decision, and the committee's role is to flag what its capital decision implies for governance, not to make the governance call. So we're just kind of framing out what the role is. So if volunteer ism continues to decline, which it is all across the nation, eventually you'll have to staff, right? And how we looked at this was, again, maintaining your two-person ambulance, adding a 3-person fire engine that would be available 24 hours a day. And that would take, including the ambulance personnel, so there's some baked in personnel costs, that would take 18 total FTEs to staff over the 3 shifts. The total gross cost for the personnel would be 1.9, and that includes the administrative. But because of your existing expenditures on the ambulance side, that would drop that to 1.2 of a net new cost if you were to do that. Now, so we kind of painted the higher picture. You could, for example, in a community like yours, elect to only staff 2 people and not 3 people, things like that, right? That would help to reduce the cost. And then maybe a 3-person solution might be a longer term, you know, option for you. Those are the kinds of things, the way we built the costs, they should be sufficiently high to accommodate all your policy choices, but you have an opportunity to lower that investment based on decisions that you make internally.
What's that 18 compared to FTEs today, or that you studied?
Yeah, if we were staffing the ambulance would take 7 people full-time to do it. So the engine would take 10 and a half, and then the ambulance would take 7. Do you remember how many?
Our current staffing.
Yeah, I know the spend, I don't remember your exact FTE count. Do you?
4 full-timers. We have 4 full-timers in the rest of the part.
Okay, there you go. So,
Right, so it's what, 6 or 7
well,
now compared to that? I mean, I'm
Well,
just trying to.
yeah, they're saying they have 4 and then the rest are filled in with part-time, right? Which is an option for you. Be
You'd
built
have to
as,
figure it out
all
as
full-time.
FTEs to have a comparison to that 18.
right.
Yeah, right.
I mean, theoretically, if you built in every 2 or 3 part-timers and made it a full-time, you could do the equivalency. We're just saying, if you were to staff it like a fully staffed department, it would take 7. Now, the policy option, just like you're doing today, is good, right? If you're saying, nope, we're gonna cover the main seats and then we're gonna fill in all vacancies with part-timers, that's great. We just kind of built the assessment high and then you can reduce from there. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Look, sorry, thank you. Looking at future, this being future potential, and a real world consideration, is there any opportunity for efficiencies of this in a single station implementation versus 2, and potentially reducing any of these costs or helping to mitigate, increased operational cost?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we didn't want to be overly prescriptive about what service levels you all wanted to entertain, but I will say at your service level, for example, you could up the FTE count to accommodate a 3-person and still hop back and forth on the ambulance, right? And And that's just in support of the volunteer groups, right? So in essence, you'll get better performance overall. And until the call volume gets high enough to where that's compromised, that's probably a reasonable pathway to go. You know, from a risk tolerance standpoint, that's probably a reasonable approach. So there's a lot of opportunity to scaffold between where you are today and the types of things that we're sharing. Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, single station path, we kind of went through this, 10-minute travel time, whether or not it's acceptable, comfortable with any limited impacts to the ISO. And then if you considered a single station, this is what it would look like. If we modeled out, for example, the Willington Hills station in the Old Farms Road and the Tallinn Turnpike there. They can cover, from that station, they can cover 89% of the calls in 10 minutes. And 76% of the jurisdiction, again, not development, landmass, right, is covered under the 5 miles. And we know what the pricing was on that one from their evaluation. Another option is to use the station 1. That would obviously need investment to get it up to par. But that would need an external engineering evaluation to get the price point because that hasn't been done. 90% of the calls could be handled within 10 minutes, and 53% of the jurisdiction is in that 5 miles. Now, that's not including Stafford and Mansfield, right? That's not including what your neighbors also provide as far as that 5 mile coverage. And then if you built a new location, you could get 92% of the calls in 10 minutes and 73% of the jurisdiction. So all that to be said, right now, obviously a net new build is probably more expensive because you would have to include the land and the new construction costs. But I don't know that until you get an engineer to evaluate what it would take to improve, say, the Willington Fire Department #1 station. So, but the big takeaway from those is because your geography is not huge, right? You can see that you're only 1, 2, 3% apart from any of these single station solutions. So you could use this fire company and cover 89%. You could use this fire company and cover 90%. You could build an entirely new station in an optimized location and it's still only 92%, right? So the takeaway is a single station solution. You got a lot of opportunity to select where the best spend is going to be because the performance is generally going to be in the same sphere. Does that make sense to everybody? So that's why getting your engineering and going, okay, this station is going to cost $7 million and this station is only going to cost $3 million. I'm just making up numbers. But you'll help maybe guide those policy choices based on the balance between the fiscal spend and your performance. But the performance overall is really similar between all of your single station options, as long as 10 minutes is on. So we built the mapping out for this just to show what this looks like, right? So the one on the left, you can see, that's the #1 fire station, right? And if you responded from that station, all of the green is what can be covered within that 10 minutes. And then the yellow is what's covered from the other stations, right? Like the Stafford station, and the other station, down to the southeast, right? So.
Tyler, so if my house is on fire, can I request Stafford to come?
If your house on fire, Stafford on there.
Stafford's gonna come?
Automatic.
Because they're right down the street.
Automatic, yep.
Okay.
So he's talking about staff, he mentioned Stafford or Mansfield in his conversation, is because.
Yeah, I know.
We're reporting structure fire, it's an automatic mutual aid request, so any structure fire is the 2 Willingtons and his house. Theoretically, south of 74 is Mansfield and Yukon, if it's north of 74 is the 2 Willingtons, Olive and Stafford.
Okay,
That are coming automatically with us.
okay, all right.
That's only for structure fires, it's not for our fire or firewall.
No, structure fire, right, no, my house
Yeah,
is
at
right
least three,
down.
three departments.
Right.
For a structure
Okay.
fire.
So.
Sorry.
So
Okay.
as a reminder, like we showed on the previous one, either of the two existing fire stations, not 13, but the two fire stations that exist today, there's really only about a 1% difference in the coverage of calls that occur. Both are right around 90%. So you could go in either direction. It's really just a policy choice about how you want to navigate that. And then if you go all the way to the right, that is the theoretical new location that you could put a station and it would cover 92%. But again, you'll have to evaluate whether that kind of spend is worth the marginal improvement that you have from the other two stations, right? So,
Can you eyeball where that location is compared to the reference point? Is that a little west from here? On the map, sorry, it's really small.
Yeah, I know, really.
yeah, it's actually not that far from the existing
Wellington.
Wellington Hill. Right.
Yeah.
So again, you just have to see, you know, what the net cost is for the improvement of the one station versus the others. Now, two station path, same kind of analogy. You can get to an 8-minute travel time with a two station solution of using, you know, existing stations and then a hybrid station up in the northeast. I'll show you the mapping on that in a second, but you could refer both of those stations, 89% at 8 minutes if you staff both of them, 94% at 9 minutes. And then greater than 90% of the community would be within that 5 miles. And then you can see option B would be the Wellington Hills location plus a new build out in the northeast. And this is what that would look like. So if you had the two stations, this is their performance there. All of the, and I didn't say this before, but all of the darker shading of green, is more than one station can cover the same area in the same time frame. There's some overlap. And if you go all the way to the right, this would be the Wellington Hills station and then a station up in the northeast. I tried looking, I apologize, I don't remember the exact address that we plugged in after our conversation with the committee. Maybe Ralph, do you guys remember what?
Yeah, that's in the vicinity of exit 70 going on to 84.
So that jumps things up to like 92% coverage in 8 minutes. And then it's all the way up, and I will say it gets up to 97% coverage with Stafford and Mansfield on automatic data. So it's a very good coverage point.
So Stafford and Mansfield are not included on these.
Not on the far right. No.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. So that's it. What questions didn't we answer? What can I help with?
I was curious about the coordinator position. Is that mostly planning, administrative, that kind of thing? Or is it in the heat of the day, management? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like fires and emergencies.
Yeah, and we left it annoyingly vague for that reason.
Thank you for being honest.
You know, depending on the ultimate governance that you go, it could go in a lot of different directions. It could be a full fire chief, it could be administrative support position. But we felt that regardless of what direction you went, it had sufficient merit to make sure that the purchasing is structured between the two agencies, that the data that we received is really disparate, you know what I mean? Things like that, so that you can get everything kind of under a singular, more transparent, accountable process than having people doing their level best, wearing multiple hats, full-time jobs, families, and everything else, right? So it's no criticism over the current state, it's just that it's probably time to formalize some of that administrative structure.
Was that included in the 1.2 million? That position?
Yes, yes. Yes, ma'am.
So I wasn't gonna say annoyingly vague, I would say there's a lot of if-then statements
Right.
in what you're providing, and I think it's a heavy lift for the committee. Especially given the history of our town. What is the timeline on this and what are next steps? What does this look like moving forward?
Is this gonna
Well,
take another 3 years?
I can't speak for the entire committee because it's no doubt gonna result in some debate. But quite frankly, I think that, our number one priority at the moment is to get our equipment back at Station 13. And get that operational, not necessarily top shelf rehab, but just a functional place to house our equipment and the emergency services personnel. Rather than having them in a camper down in South Wellington.
Yeah, that's just.
That's a decision that you're making right there.
And then we go from there, then we look at, all right, we have a 1955 building on the hill. If we go to two-station solution, well, obviously, it would be nice to improve that. But it's also all in what the town can afford to do.
But Wellington Hill is functional, it's fine, Station 13 is not.
Correct. That's why I'm saying, that's what we would really like to get done.
Finished.
So is the committee's charge to fix Station 13 first, so we can remedy the issue we have with our equipment and our personnel, our paid personnel, and then evaluate all of this other information? Is that what
So
you're?
that's gonna be spending more money.
Try to do it all.
Understood.
Yeah.
I'm trying to wrap my head around what this really looks like for our town, because we're having a lot of really big conversations right now. They're all really.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I just follow up on that? I'm gonna kind of die on this hill a little bit because, I was on the board of finance when we made the decision to, remediate and try to find stopgap solutions to avoid significant infrastructure costs at Station 13. It's part of the reason why this committee was formed, to come up with these viable alternatives so that we could have a comprehensive plan in advance of spending any significant dollars at Station 13. That was 2.5 years ago. And it seems like we're right back at that conversation again with 2.5 years without anything happening. So I'm frustrated in that now being the fault because we haven't gotten further than this study in the past 2.5 years. I also think it's important before we make any decisions on what the next step to have realistic expectations and comprehensive visions of what these two options are so that we can assign realistic costs to them. Because I assume the programmatic need is going to change in a two-station model for any new build versus a single station model, which might be bigger, might need more space, and those costs are going to vary widely.
Mhm.
I don't see how this community can make any decision until this committee really gets that next step of the process moving as expeditiously as possible. I also know how long that takes, so there's a lot of pretty tough work and tough conversations are gonna need to happen quickly. I really continue, I've been saying it for about a year now, I strongly recommend we get an honest project manager involved with this committee to start helping guide this discussion. Because
That topic has been on.
it's been a very long time.
Agreed.
But I do understand the complications of this effort, you know, and what you guys are struggling with. It's a complex problem. It's gonna take some time to figure out kind of effectively. So,
Why do we need to hire another person, project manager, whatever? I mean, can't you guys make a damn decision? I mean, it's just.
Well, that was the point of this
You've got
meeting.
you've got everything. Wellington has always had 2 firehouses,
Correct.
okay? So whether you like combine or consolidate, whatever, as, you know, one. I think, I mean, I don't think we need to build like a brand new firehouse someplace else or whatever. Just fix Station 13.
Well, I think we do.
It's,
I don't know, is all the mold out of there?
No,
So is it cheaper to rip the thing down and build a similar size station than to try to
that your question defines the point of this meeting. That when the committee was first formed, we were given some guidance by that administration that there was money available that we would be able to refurbish Station 13. We were then told that that money was not available for refurbishment. So the first 8 months of the committee was deciding what to do about Station 13. And the committee believed that we were on the right track, spend that money to rehabilitate that building, to make it into a warehouse at least for building. We were then told that we couldn't do that. So the committee reformed and changed the trajectory. And on guidance of the Board of Finance, we commissioned this study. That's the way the committee went. So we were responding to what the town leaders were requesting. And so here we are. We have a comprehensive plan now of various opportunities. And as Steve talked, it's all about response time. If 10 minutes for when you pick up the phone to getting emergency services at your home is acceptable, that gives us courses of action. If we want to have it 8 minutes, or right around, I think we're 8 or 9 right now, then we have other courses of action. So what the ask tonight is that all of you that are here, and I talk amongst yourself, tell your friends, look at this study. We're gonna be asking for feedback. But really, in our next couple of meetings, we are going to start as a committee, if whatever we hear from the public, we're going to start working together to come up with a solution. Now, with that, there are always complexities. Since the committee was formed, we've applied for grants. We got a $500,000 grant to do something with Station 13. That's from the US Department of Agriculture. There's a laundry list of conditions how we can use that money. We don't know how it's gonna be. Our first selectman just got an opportunity from the state of Connecticut for possibly a $10 million grant for Willington Hill. All of these things factor into these decisions, and they're way out of our control. To me, the US Department of Agriculture grant we didn't know we were gonna get that. We couldn't depend on it. We couldn't plan on having it. Now we have the money. Now we have to react and respond to that, or we don't get it. In the same way with these.
Spending that, sorry to interrupt, what's the timeline for spending that?
We don't know all the conditions yet. It's still, we're negotiating, First Selectman is negotiating with the US Department of Agriculture, Joe Courtney's office, and various other agencies that dictate how that money is spent. Because there's a lot of rules around it, and they're not very clear. We asked for a grant for just rehabilitation and make it into an emergency board. I forgot the term, whatever.
If I'm not mistaken, Andy, on the ag grant, that's money coming from the federal government,
Right.
okay, funneled through the state of Connecticut. And state of Connecticut's not gonna commit anything till they have the money, which complicates our applying and getting that grant money.
And it kind of hinders our ability to, as a committee, to react rapidly and give you those answers that you're asking for, because we're not gonna say that, we're gonna do this if we then find out that we can't use the money that way. And now, First Selectman just applied for a CIF grant capital community investment fund. And the person, oh yeah, there's up to maybe $10 million. Well, that's a big chunk that if we got, but we can't say we're gonna get this, let's move forward on that trajectory.
It's in the application.
It's in the application.
But that's for Wellington Hill.
Correct. Now,
Well,
again,
Hold on.
Concerned about Wellington Hill.
let's
Well,
explain
this-
why.
Dumbfounded,
but
right?
that's what we're doing. This study was to determine what is the best course of action for the town. To keep the 2 fire departments or to go into a single fire department. And you heard tonight, there's some strength and some rigor around having one fire building. You think of where things are.
Well, Wellington's always had 2 fire buildings.
And we have, and there's some good conversation as
So, I
to
mean,
why that's.
my thing is that Wellington Hill, there's nothing wrong with it from what I can see. Station 13 is not functioning, period. That's where the concern should be. And I don't think there's a reason to build a brand new one someplace else.
Okay.
Can I ask something? I
That's
mean,
a valid
I don't
opinion.
know. Am I being dumbfounded here or something, or?
No, that's.
Deanne Lucian Road. When I was listening to the presentation, did I hear correctly when it was said that, the structure of the building for the, fire trucks and everything is not big enough?
The Willington Hill Fire Department is really at its capacity for. Correct me where I'm wrong, and all of you folks that are part of that fire department, from what I understand. That let's say you got a new truck, it may not fit, because the apparatus keeps changing in size, length, structure. Now, most recommendations, and I think Steve, I think it's in, within Steve's report. That most fire departments now recommend drive-through. You don't want people backing into, because a lot of injuries happen from backing up. And they're very, very narrow, and they're very close to the ceiling. You get a new truck, it may not fit. So how do you do that? If you heard, like you heard Steve say, the fire department, FPA, National Fire Protection Agency, recommends replacing vehicles after 25 years. You buy a new truck, it may not fit in that building. So your answer, yes, Willington Hill seems fine, but it may not be fine. And then that'd be fine in 20 years. And that's another, you saw the map. We don't want to expect that Willington is not going to change. There's some very large tracts of land, there's a very good chance will be going up for development in the next 10 or 15 years. Whatever facility is gonna be done, if we're going to invest taxpayer dollars in that, it has to be able to respond to changes in the town demographics. So whatever those may be, declining population, increasing population, we don't know, but we need to be able to react. I see another hand.
What was the state's basis, or Joe Courtney's basis on the $10 million for Wellington?
No, that's a brand new, I'm sorry, I didn't.
That's the
mean to mislead.
CIF one.
The Joe Courtney Act is working, this is, again, if Mike was here, he could explain it better. If our first selectman was here, that there was the way the grant came through from this is a federal grant from the Department of Agriculture, specifically for the station on Route 32. And what we requested for was we want a bucket of money to fix it, kind of what the grant asked for. What we got was something with a lot of structure around it. And what First Selectman is trying to do is really decipher that. And can it be used for construction? Or is that money just for research and analysis? Or is it for building? Is it for drainage? That wasn't very clear. And again, I'm saying this from memory of what I remember, correct me where I went if I go wrong, that the representative from the Department of Agriculture was not perfectly clear on how the money could be used. Mr. Courtney's representative was trying to get through some of that.
I get that, but I'm puzzled on why they're focusing on Willington Hill for Station 13.
This is a different grant, that's a different thing. This was just, as I understand it, again, Mike's not here to speak to it, he was at a meeting with representatives from the state, and someone said, hey, I hear that you have some issues with your fire department buildings. And he said, yes, we do. And he said, we have two. And they said, well, what's going on? He said, well, we have this one in South Willington. And they go, well, you got a federal grant on that. We can't touch that.
Don't overlap
Because
grants.
there's an active grant already in place going through the state already. So we're not gonna touch that. What else you got? And they go, well, we have Willington Hill. And Willington Fire Department, Willington Hill Fire Department commissioned their own study with their own money about rebuilding that building some time ago. And they were able to give those plans to the state with some modifications. And that is now part of that grant application. That's about as much detail as I can offer.
Applying for that grant required that you be almost shovel ready.
That you'd be
The Hill
able to-
Department had, well, almost
Shovel
shovel.
ready is on paper, it's a paper.
In other words, the plans are drawn.
Yes.
Okay, the Hill had done that a few years ago.
And
Does-
yeah.
For a new facility across the street.
as a thought experiment.
So it's plans to submit to apply for the grant. Now, what kind of strings get tied to that grant as to where we can actually use the money should we be awarded that? Can we divert it to pull stations in some way, shape or form? We don't know that for sure yet.
So that doesn't dilute, to me, that doesn't dilute the value of this study done by Steve Knightspool. That now we have real data that we can say, all right, let's say we refurbish both stations, let's say somebody just gives us a ton of money. And we have unlimited funds, we have 2 stations to fix, great, we can do that. Somebody gives us a ton of money to just do 1 station, we know what, I don't know consequences, but we know what happens if we do those things. Now we have hard data that we can talk about, and we can plan accordingly, sir.
Does somebody have statistics on how many calls get responded to from each station and what type of calls they are? Because I mean, we're talking a lot about 2 stations, which I have no stake in the 2 station thing as much as, like, if one station is responding to 90% of the calls and the other's not, I don't know how that works. Right, in terms of what those stats are and who's responding to what. And
Ron could talk to
That
that.
data's in there,
I
right?
can answer that question. Back in the 90s, when Tyler was chief, he and then Chief Wellington Hill got together, because we were having problems with response from both departments. So every time the tones go off, or every single call in the town of Wellington, both departments respond.
And so both departments respond.
All available personnel has the opportunity to go to.
and how many of those are fires?
Well, it's 74% medical calls, so 26%.
Somebody, but Wellington Health doesn't have an ambulance.
Correct, but they're first responders,
Okay.
so they respond with their service truck and they can start doing emergency services to the person, medical services until the ambulance gets there.
All those numbers are in the study.
They're in the study. Okay.
Yeah,
But I mean, if you expanded Wellington Hill, let's say you did something with Wellington Hill, would you then add an ambulance there? Or would
No.
the ambulance still only be a,
consolidation would mean everything would go for a new station on Wellington Hill.
right,
So now you got, Steve said, need 6 pieces of apparatus. You got 2 ambulances, so that's 6 fire trucks. So that's 8 pieces of apparatus. Eventually, we're looking at, 10 people working on the shift. We gotta look at the future. We can't just look
Right.
now. That's kind of what, we planned 40 years ago with Station 13, but we got thrown there. So we have to build this time for more.
So one question to fill in a little bit of the blank. One of the reasons that Wellington Hill got the nod for this most recent application is that Wellington Hill Fire Department owns the property across the street where the church was. So now you have an owned piece of property that doesn't need to be newly acquired. So when this person that was talking about this CIF grant, that wasn't attractive to them. Oh, you already own the property and you already have some plans. Why don't you submit that for the grant?
Yeah, that was,
And they weren't gonna touch the one down a River Road, down on Route
because of the other
32,
grant.
because there's already a grant process for that, and they don't wanna mess with that. It's just,
When I
that's
said,
government bureaucracy, and it's out of my hands.
when I said shovel ready, I mean, basically what I was saying is, they own the land, we have plans, minimal update on the plans to apply for this grant, so.
Are there any other state monies available for, reimbursement for building such?
Well, yes, these, apparently, and I'm new to this, but I don't know a lot about grants, but yes, these grant cycles come up all the time.
Yeah, it's great.
And even on the
I
federal level.
appreciate the forward thinking, and I'm interested to learn that, is a federal money, available if they can get off the dime, for the
Yeah.
River Road Station study. I came here tonight expecting that the committee was gonna present what they found to renovate or destroy and build new on that, River Road one. And I'm just surprised because I'm naive. But at least somebody is thinking about, there's money. Now, if you can just, find out what you can do with that money and tell us what
Yeah.
could you do with that place,
Yeah, that is,
Besides sell it to the highest, but
quite frankly, I think this is really now just Andy Marcus speaking, that when you get that, when all of a sudden we got the grant, it was like, oh crap, almost. Now we have to do something with that, but we don't know what the rules are. We don't even know what game we're playing at this point.
So
Somebody said we have
a time frame of that, I mean, cause that's.
We have
that's
$548,000 or something that was awarded,
Yeah,
but we don't know how we can use it. So it's like, all right, we wanna get moving.
well, I think the
Well,
committee
we're
should
not gonna
address
spend-
that in a timely fashion.
Yeah, and we're doing our best to do this in a timely fashion, but it's a slow grind. And frankly, it's not that much different in industry. The
Yeah.
corporations take a lot of time to get to decisions too. Municipalities, probably a little bit longer. Because it's a different public funding, it's a little bit different ask. We're not just gonna raise the price on our product in order to get more money to fund it, we're not gonna sell stock. We're gonna ask you, and me, I'm a taxpayer too, I'm not immune to whatever happens to the mill rate. It's all coming out of the same bucket, and yeah, it's a big ask, but so, the fact that it might take time, I understand the frustration. But I'd rather take the time to do it right and do the very best we can. These committees that are formed, as I alluded to earlier, I think they give us a reaction time to take advantage of grant opportunities, where if we didn't do all this, we wouldn't get those opportunities. That people look kindly on these studies. We belong to the Capital Region Council of Government. When we can show them that we have these committees and we have these studies done, they go, oh, this is great. We can work with that. We can help you. So it's not a waste of time. It's a slow grant, like I said, but we're doing our best, and all of you that can participate, the more you participate, the better off we are, the faster we can respond.
I guess, how do you, think the committee's approach is gonna be to determining the response time question, answering the response time question?
I'm really hoping that it comes from you, that not you personally.
Well,
but
no,
yes,
I
you
know.
personally.
The difference between 8 and 10 minutes is not enough to warrant spending more money, because.
If I cut my femoral with a chainsaw,
Well, I
8 to
agree.
10 could make a big
I
difference.
agree, but he was basing it all on travel time, which is great, but if you don't have the volunteers, or people live further away, or that group of volunteers lives further away, or right, there's a lot of factors that go into that, travel time that aren't in that, or that are sort of set in that equation, and only geographical distance back to the population density is another piece of it. So it sounds great, hey, it's 15 minutes, or it's 10 minutes, or whatever it is, but the reality of that, it's gonna vary.
Exactly,
dramatically.
and like he said, some of those things are not, I mean, pie in the sky is 2 stations, one in the north, one in the south, brand new facilities that have every piece of equipment, fully staffed with 5 to 10 people 24/7. Response times will be very quick, but there's no way that we can afford.
Not a lot of guarantees in life. I can't see 8 minutes versus 10 being guaranteed if people would go that route. That's too bad. This
And
might
all
be
the
good.
credit to the volunteers and the guys now, all.
Well, they were all supposed to be here. They're all fighting the fire out of 84.
Right.
But you're absolutely correct. The assumptions that are up there that this can utilize are predicated on an assumption that volunteers are gonna even go to the call.
Yeah, right. Right. But they not
You know,
have,
well, the fact is, there's times it does not happen, period. And the only people that are showing up to mitigate that emergency, whether it's a fire, an accident, a person trapped, a moral artery, but are those 2 people that you're paying to be there.
Yeah.
A lot of times, that's what you're getting.
That's what you're getting.
And my other point was that this is not, all these things we're talking about are not unique to Wellington by no means. If, I hate this term, you look outside our little snow globe of Wellington, there are a lot of communities around us that have wrestled with this and made very logical, well, some of them are illogical decisions on how they're gonna provide emergency services. Mansfield is a great case. When I was the fire chief, Mansfield had, Charlie helped me, 2 people at the Mansfield Firehouse for the ambulance.
Yeah.
They had one person at the Eagle Firehouse on 32 and 1 person at the Eagle Firehouse on 195. Yeah.
They operated with just 4 people on in 3 locations for years.
And today,
They're working on a 7-person model now. So hopefully they'll have 7 on the shift.
the whole time, with the paid fire.
That's
deputy chief.
That's not UConn. UConn's got its own thing, you know.
No,
Say, Mansfield's unique because they got the university right there.
Right.
Wellington's got it too. Wellington gets mutual aid from UConn, whether it's ambulance or that first response out for the first alarm structure fire. So, we're in good shape when it comes to that, getting the mutual aid from the surrounding towns. And that's where that 5-mile limit comes in, whether it's from Stafford on the other end or from Mansfield on the south end.
But Tyler Millick's at the back, he was fire chief, he works out of TN, he's the dispatcher. Charlie, you were involved in fire departments your whole life.
Yeah, I was chief guy in Mansfield.
Yeah, so they're resident experts.
But it's funny that, again, it's not unique to us, and it probably would be surprising for everyone to know, even though we're a town of, as they say,
5,500.
55.
55.
there are only 2 or 3 fire EMS departments in our region to not have some type of paid structure, paid staff, because of the lack of volunteers and continuing to find volunteers. And I'm sure, you know, the folks who would pay attention to the news to see what happened after they pull off. Their fire budget was $140,000 a year. It went to 1.1 or 1.2 million with full-time paid fire chief, adding 2 more full-time staff.
Was that?
Ashford.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm not saying that's the ultimate amount, I'm just saying that there are other communities around us that are addressing this.
There.
That if we look kind of outside of our boundaries, if our town leadership has some conversation with these folks. I agree with Steve, that there is, it's not like, hey, we need $5 million right now to go build this and hire these people. That there can be a systematic approach to this.
Absolutely.
But you have to identify what you wanna do. You have the plan, you had studies done, you have to have the folks that really have the gumption to put these things into place and not kick the can down the road consistently.
All right.
If you have if everybody here has everyone has a level, an expected level of service when you call 911. I mean, vary a tad, but my guess is ultimately you'd like somebody to come within 10 or 15 minutes. That's a great idea. Yeah, you know,
You don't like it.
well, if you want 7 minutes, 6 minutes, 5 minutes, 4 minutes, cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
Exactly. That's
That's
right.
how it works.
It's all about response. So,
And.
Yeah.
You know, but this isn't unique to Wallingford, it's everywhere, there's towns right now, they're still struggling with it.
Yep.
Around us.
Well, and that sort of brings the question of cost into it because our costs have, you know, skyrocketed in terms of our operational.
absolutely.
Or our payroll, I should say, but in the last few years. And so it's a question of what can you sustain? And I think when, Mr. Knight did his presentation, the point of what I took away from it is because people are saying, why don't we just fix the one on 32? The thing about the other location is it's central. And he was talking about response time and factoring in what you just alluded to about future development. And, you know, we can't expect the town is gonna stay static in terms of where its main neighborhoods are. But so one is in a more extreme position. I think that's what he was showing as a single station option would need to be more central. And if we stay two or 2 satellites or whatever, it's a different decision. It may be, you know, there may be economies of scale to that too, but obviously if you're putting the apparatus together, that's apparently more efficient. It's what I'm getting is what their study is saying.
I've seen this suggested.
So that's why it's such a tough decision, because the cost involved with doubling up and doing it the way we've been doing it all along.
The point about mutual aid, raises a really important question for me. Because I understand that we receive mutual aid, but I believe as a town, we provide more mutual aid to Union and Holland on nights and weekends. And Stafford, then, we take it, if you were to just do a balance of the scales, which the citizens of Willington are paying for. And we can't ask them to pony up, they're not gonna give us a payment in kind because we're nice to them. But I wanna make sure that the amount that's on there, in terms of that response time, only includes within the town of Willington, that does not include response times outside of Willington, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And what you mentioned, it's actually so, if you go back years and years, it's cyclical. You know, I mean, there's times where we receive mutual aid very heavily for whatever reason. And there's years where we provide mutual aid heavily. So it's somewhat cyclical, but that's the whole part of the mutual aid system, what makes it work. The fine line, I will say, is that when does mutual aid become primary aid? So if
I
you
would argue in Union, it is primary. They don't have it. Ashford's gonna step up and cover more of Union because they're closer. So we don't know. It is obviously always a changing picture. But I just wanted to make sure that that data wasn't skewing our numbers in terms of looking at everything. Those 1,000 or so calls were only within the confines of the town.
Yeah, we found it by the geography, right?
It hasn't been cyclical in the in the last 6 years, though.
I'm talking about 10 or 20.
Yeah, it would have to be a lot.
Based
I
on
don't know what
the
conditions
curve.
would change.
But there's an incentive for towns to underfund their fire department, knowing that other towns will pick up with mutual aid. It increases their response time, obviously, if we've got to drive all the way out to Union. Their response time is more than 10 minutes if we're covering them, right? But there's not an incentive for us to staff full-time 2 firehouses and 2 EMS, locations at our expense. If a whole bunch of that time is going outside of Wellington, the ambulances in Union, they're not here to make it to my house in 8 minutes either.
Yeah, kind of like your paramedic program in Summers.
Yeah, so I mean, so there's an impact on us in Wellington in providing that mutual aid, and there's no incentive for them to cover their own town. Is that correct?
And the other thing too, I have a question is, I know cost is up for everything,
Right.
okay? So, I mean, like last year when all the houses were reassessed, my taxes went up $2,400 for that year. So that's my house.
Mine's up.
What, right, so where did all that money go? Where, all that extra freaking money, where'd it go?
But the union.
Are y'all figuring out something? Yeah, which union?
It's on every single line item of the town
We
budget.
cut it out of the budget.
It's all spread out in every single line item of the town budget that's where the money. It's right down to the penny.
So, because you brought up union, I wanna make sure there's a crystal clear understanding of how our response to union occurred. Ron, how many years ago? I was chief, right?
Yeah.
Many years ago. We had a discussion with the town, the union does not have any animals, they have about 100 calls a year.
They have 600 people to put it in context.
That's correct, they have 100 calls a year.
600 people, for the whole town.
So, and primarily their calls are along the interstate. So they didn't have
Yeah.
animals, they were utilizing commercial animal service out of Stafford at the time, which was extremely unreliable. A lot of times, it got to the point where we were going to be under mutual aid anyway, because this other animals weren't available. So at the time, I went to the board of selectmen and said, listen, this is the issue that we were came to us, the union did. There's a PSA, it's a designated area for animals coverage. And Union wanted Wellington to take the PSA and provide the animals coverage. So we had a powwow with the town leaders at the time and said, well, we're not in the business of providing this animal service for free, blah, blah, blah. So at the same time, we started, along with all these other animal services, started being able to bill insurance companies for transports. So when you look at the amount of calls that we're going to up there and the amount of income we're pulling into Fund 17, it made financial sense to the town fathers and us at the time. We then made the mutual agreement between all of us to take over the PSA to provide the animal surgery, because we're collecting $25,000 at least a year in income into Fund 17, which offsets purchases and kind of takes the tax burden off the taxpayers of Wilmington. That was the intent of taking the PSA for Union. We actually do make money going to Union on the insurance billing.
Well, partial. We don't cover our costs. We make.
You can't cover $680,000 going to Union. That's very obvious. What we're saying is with the 100 calls that we're going to, we're collecting 20,000 plus a year into that fund. At the time, that was the reason why that we did that. And it was done with the entire board of selectmen in agreement at the time. That's the union issue.
Right, but we lost the transport kind of bubble that we had then, right?
No.
We're not doing that Medicare is not paying as much for that as they were.
That's correct. That's by no fault of our own or union.
No, I'm not saying it's anyone's fault that we
It's gonna
entered a
deal as it
long-term
used to be.
agreement.
100%.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, in the healthcare industry, insurance companies, if you get injured in an auto accident, those insurance companies pay a lot better than if you're, going to your house on, you're on Medicare or Medicaid. So we actually do make out, not handsomely, but we do. That was the intent of it. Whether you agree or disagree is the point. And that's why.
We're not losing any money.
Yeah. We'll be able to. Right, we'll make the chapter, they say, right, we'll make the chapter.
It sounds like it does, yeah. So I think the question about the costs is, we might be covering some of our operational costs. We're not covering our capital costs. which is why we keep kicking the money,
Well,
kicking them. There, if we have to spend $38 million, that investment, we will never recover that.
So back in the mid-90s, there was, because we had the insurance recovery fund, because there was legislation laws to build insurance company. We started doing that. From day one, we made an agreement with the town that all of that income is going to go to what we call Fund 17. Fund 17 is exclusively for the use of offsetting costs for fire apparatus and ambulances. So I will, and Ron, I'll put him on a pedestal too. I'm proud to sit here with Ron, that because of our vision back then, the taxpayers of the town of Millington, the taxpayers have not paid for a fire truck or an ambulance in over 20 years. It all come out of Fund 17.
So it covers capital in terms of vehicles, but not capital in terms of building.
That's correct.
Okay.
But don't make that much money.
I'm just saying that our
Paid for one of the ambulances.
yeah, I'm just saying that when we're talking about it covering our expenses, it's covering our operational and our vehicle
It'll never cover-
expenses.
it'll never-
The union piece of what you're saying,
Those
that
are-
it covers it. It
That's a
doesn't
great,
cover our capital.
that's a great conversation to bring up to your selectmen.
Yeah.
So they can talk to the other members of, to the surrounding towns about that. And I think that there is some energy there. I mean, already some services are being talked about consolidation, and there's a lot more conversation about that. James Marcy had a question or?
Yeah, I was
There's
just
somebody in the
hoping.
waiting room? You would admit somebody's in the waiting room online?
Oh, it's Jefferson.
Yeah,
I don't know. Somebody's in the waiting room.
all right, couple of questions for
Yes, sir.
Steve, while we have you. Clarifying on the cost you represented throughout that. So the $640 to $680 renovation cost of the Wellington Hill site, that was not escalated. That's the values.
Yeah, it was from their study of
Study
it.
happened a few years ago.
Yep.
so,
Yep.
Years ago?
How many years ago?
I don't know, how many years ago, because.
Yeah, I was like within the last.
I just heard what those plans were, but it wasn't a decade.
Construction escalation is a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Just
You'd have to
thinking ahead,
reevaluate.
and then secondarily, the cost for new construction, you had provided in the report.
Mhm.
Are those construction costs, are those project costs that you pulled, do they include site work, just as a comparative?
It was an all-in cost. We just got them from like, publicly available, like council presentations for the new station cost.
Okay, so, I mean,
Yep.
yeah, so all in costs have a wide variability.
For sure,
Yes.
right,
Largely, property acquisition, site costs, they vary widely.
absolutely. Absolutely. We actually would prefer to dodge that just because of all the variability, but we were asked to try to provide some framework for it, so.
Yeah, no, understood. It seems like it's driven, there are several outliers in that. track
Absolutely.
record, yeah, so,
Yes.
I think it's gonna be important for any consideration, because to get a more realistic, understanding of potential project costs
Yes,
with outside acquisition.
right.
I mean, because the reason we're here, right, is because
Yep.
we have two stations that are out of date and that they're
Yep.
both looking at major capital projects and are both looking at major capital repairs.
Yep.
Which is why, a large part of why this committee was formed, to come up with an effective solution that kind of help mitigate some of those potential capital costs, because what I will say is, while Fund 17, has carried capital equipment replacement costs now, it will not cover things moving forward
No.
based on
Absolutely not.
projections. So we are at that limit, and we have, I think, every piece of apparatus is essentially getting close to its replacement cost.
After $400,000, great. And you can, go out 7 years on lease. Yeah, when they're building.
Exactly. So I mean, these costs are gonna be becoming very real. So I think, again, a big part of this discussion is gonna be accurate budgets. And I think the sooner we can get to that point, the sooner we're gonna have a realistic understanding of what the impact of this is, say. Talking from the perspective of capital improvement program for the year.
Yeah.
But facing all those real,
Well, and
things
if
that
I'm,
we've kicked down the road. It's a big part of the discussion, and any cost avoidance is going to be a critical piece of this, so. The sooner we can get to that point, I think the better this discussion will be, as
Yeah.
good. Well,
if I'm not overstepping, I would suggest deciding on what your desired emergency performance is will drive the rest of it, right? And someone mentioned it very astutely, they're spot on. and we're not pushing any objective of what we've provided, but from a fiscal standpoint and operational, a single station is obviously gonna be your least spend, right? And a staffed single station will outperform multiple volunteer stations because of the time it takes to assemble people to go to calls. So I say that from the perspective, and I forget who mentioned it, but your other stations could be much reduced on the cost center if you're just placing for ISO, right? You're placing an apparatus out there, somebody could come respond, it checks that box, you have your 5 mile coverage, but you really are performing mostly from a centralized location, right? So, deciding what you want to be first will delineate out how you approach your architecture and engineering estimates of what, because literally, not suggesting you have to do this, but in many communities across the country for ISO, it's nothing but a pole barn and an apparatus. Right, so you've got a lot of flexibility.
Just the 10-minute travel time is what we kind of have now, correct?
Yeah, yes, and if you think about it, while both stations are responding, your staffed resource is influencing that. So the GIS and your historical really line up pretty well.
Mr.
Yes.
Knight, is there more information in the report comparing us to other towns? I can't gauge whether 8 and 10 are meaningful, if it's a meaningful difference, is it, if I lived in Tolland, is it 2 minutes and it's 4 times that amount here? I don't have a
Yes,
context.
let me say it 2 different ways, like a good consultant. You're not compared to other towns, we didn't do that, but we did compare you to put perspective about whether the response time and what it means, right? What does the clinical environment say about response time, et cetera? What I will say is, for both fire and EMS, getting there really quickly for a very small percentage of those calls are important. The rest of the calls, it's not very important. So, now, this is agnostic to the human experience, it's right, so take it with a grain of salt. But from a marginal perspective, the investment to move from 10 minutes to 8 minutes is not the same return on investment as going from 6 minutes to 4 minutes, right? So you're in a range that a lot of communities are in for the travel time. That's nothing aberrant about it. It's a policy choice about how quickly you want to be there. But if you had a staffed resource, just to put perspective, even large urban environments are at 8 minutes, 9 minutes, et cetera, on travel time, right? So your current performance window, as far as the travel time for stations, is only part of it. Whether you're staffed or not is actually a bigger piece of it, because that's almost 7 minutes, right? So the question for you all is probably more so, is 15 minutes acceptable? Right? And if it is, then, and I didn't tease it out specifically this way, but if you think about it, if, let's just say theoretically 15 minutes is fine, then if you had staffed resources, you could travel for 12 of that.
And the 8 and 10 estimates are based on staffed resources at 1 or 2 stations?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Got it. I got it. Thank you.
Yes. And sorry if that wasn't clear.
No, I got it. I
Great
caught
question.
up. Thank you.
See a hand raised?
Christine?
So let's just imagine that Wellington has absolutely no services, nothing at all. Did you folks think about, or did the committee ask for possibly your recommendation on where one station might be situated in Wellington to the best advantage?
Yes.
According to our road, the way our road system is here.
Yes.
Where would be the best place to put that one station if that was the case?
Yes.
Where the response time for
So where?
Yes, it's on one of those maps.
Yeah, it's on,
Map.
it's basically a little west, more towards the main thoroughfare. I don't remember the exact cross.
About where you're sitting right now,
Yeah.
in all honesty.
Yeah.
I just think that's kind of important, like what is,
Yeah, like West Garage was like kind of an epicenter
Yeah.
down there, yeah.
that would best serve
everything.
Yes, right, and that was kind of our takeaway, is a single station solution does have merit, right? The policy discourse that you all have is, you could use Willington Hills, Willington Fire Department number 1, or a new station, all of them will perform within 2-3% of each other. So the road network is supporting it regardless of which way you go. It's really just a matter of the facility costs and your options for that, because we don't know, but you may find that extending the bays and doing all the things that you need to fix might exceed a new, I don't know, right? You just have to evaluate that and figure out what's the right direction.
And to get there, here's what I might ask you, send your comments, thoughts to amarco@wellington.gov.
WillingtonCT.
WillingtonCT.gov, send it to R. Tulis at Wellington, send it to M. McCoo at WillingtonCT.gov.
Well, Andy, you've been you're asking for folks' opinions and stuff, and you kind of mentioned a survey. You folks, have you put a survey together, and is there a way of getting it out?
I don't know, not a survey, the report that Steve did is on the Wellington website, that's what's out there.
Yes, but.
Are you talking about a
We didn't do a survey
of the residents?
We didn't do a questionnaire or
Not
survey.
asking for a public.
We could do that.
What's that?
We could do a survey of the taxpayers, of the town's
We could
residents.
do, I guess we could,
You kind of have it.
if you think that's important, all right.
Not enough people here to actually.
Yeah.
You'll make a decision, then somebody will come out of the woodwork and say, why the hell did you do that?
Well, no matter what we do, there are gonna be people that say, I didn't, we have our public meetings. And they're open to the public, we ask people to participate, we had this tonight.
And until they have to pay money, they won't think about it.
Well, that's true, and that's what we were, my goal, or I guess, I don't know, maybe not. The goal that I think the committee, all these committees should have, by the time it gets to a referendum, everyone should be fully informed. And they shouldn't be learning about this thing the night of. How do we do that? I don't know, this is one way. This is a way of doing it. We even provided refreshments. So, hey, if you have better ideas, love to hear them. We're gonna start talking about the solutions. And I believe the committee members, many of them are here. We sort of framed it up that we're gonna come up with our 3 or 4 courses of action. And we're going to put some dollar values around those courses of action and then see what those are. And then look at the response times and then sort of do this whole thing again. Here's what the committee's decided as our best courses of action. Here's where the cost would be, and here's what the service standards would be and what the expectations are. And that's what's gonna happen. I see a couple of hands up.
Does that indicate there's a question or comment from Mr. Smith?
What?
No.
He hasn't raised his hand.
We submitted into the room.
He doesn't have his hand up, so I think he's all right. Bob?
Yeah, and everybody's thinking about those federal grants.
Yeah.
That are a possibility.
Yep.
One thing that everybody has to understand about federal grants, especially when we get into the millions of dollars.
Yeah.
The application for those are inches thick.
Right.
And each question on both sides of the page is a string that they have to cut through. If you're gonna get a federal grant, and there's a lot of money out there, but trust me, be patient.
Yeah.
Who's managing grants for the town right now?
I'm sorry?
Who is managing grants for the town right now?
It's all on the first selectman's desk. We don't have a grant person. The first selectman, as Mike explained it, he went to a meeting the other day and they met with the CIF. It was designed for selectmen and people to go to.
I know.
And they said, what do you got going on? And Tammy Nuccio got involved. So there's there's a bridge on Polster Road that is probably, they said, oh, that's a good project. We'll take that on. I don't know what that means. This is our state legislature saying that. I didn't know there was a bridge on Polster Road. I didn't remember where Polster Road was. There's also, they're looking at a grant to do a water treatment facility for the village in South Wellington. I didn't know that was a thing, but it's a thing.
But I would say,
They
Mike
pop up.
Cavano in land use is often involved in grant work we do in town. And,
a lot of times it comes with extra reporting. and
Yeah, there's a lot of
reporting.
research.
It's
It's a
a
lot. It's a
We're
lot.
talking about some pretty heavy grants.
Yes,
Yeah.
And-
and you don't know if you're gonna get them.
Stress trying to.
I mean, I think this federal grant was kind of weird that they put it together, they heard of some money available, they put it together and didn't hear anything.
Yeah.
Then Blumenthal called Mike D'Amato down in the planning and zoning and said, hey, it looked like it's gonna go through. The legislature went through it. Then all kinds of things went weird in Congress and then they didn't talk to us for 6 months, so we thought it was dead. And then all of a sudden it was resurrected and then they said, oh, you're getting the money.
So the
So
problem is there's a million strings attached to it.
there's a lot of strings attached to it. It can almost, sometimes it can be so onerous that you almost say, we don't want the money. But we don't wanna say that. We want the money. It's our money. We wanna get some of our money back.
That grant is for Emergency Operations Center.
Exactly.
So Station 13 was the EOC for the town, so that's why when it's
Well, the
renovated.
money went in that direction. Yeah.
Right.
That's why it's tied to that state.
Yep, that's fine.
And now, this other grant is state money, so they don't wanna marry this.
They don't wanna marry the two together, or they don't wanna talk about it. Bob?
Just a comment about your consultant. I was impressed that he understood that we kicked the can down the road.
I'm pretty sharp like that. All right, folks, it's 9 o'clock. That's what, so, any other questions? Feel free to contact, like I said, Art Tools, A. Marco, Wellington.gov, call Mike. Mike McCool, your first selectman, he's jacked into this
And
too.
one thing to keep in mind, this committee is responsible to the board of selectmen.
Right, all we do is recommend to the board of selectmen.
So that's all we can do.
yourself.
Don't ask me how that happened, but it happened.
That's coincidental that two of us are, but
Oddly enough, that it happened that way. By golly, we checked with FOIA, it's okay.
And thank you, Mr. Knight.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Knight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming tonight, really helps. You're gonna be asked more questions, participate any way you can, we need to hear from you. You are the legislature, help us out. Feel free to ask questions anytime.